The door told me to go away. I stood there, suitcase in hand, the afternoon sun warming my shoulders, and heard it again. The flat, metallic voice from the smart lock I never wanted in the first place. Access denied. At first, I thought I'd mistyped the code. I'd never been good with machines. I pressed the numbers again, slow and careful. 1963, Rochi. The year I got married, the code I'd used for the last 2 years. The lock beeped. Then the voice again. Access denied. Attempt logged. Something in my stomach turned cold. I bent closer, squinting at the tiny screen. Too many failed attempts. System locked. Contact administrator. Administrator? This was my house. I leaned against the porch rail, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and humiliation. My hands were shaking, not from age this time, but from something deeper. Something I hadn't felt since James died. A sudden, sharp awareness that I was utterly alone. I pressed the doorbell. No answer. I rang again, and again. I could hear movement inside. The familiar creak of the hallway floorboard near the coat closet. Someone was home. Of course someone was home. My son, Trevor, had moved in 2 months ago, temporarily, with his wife Denise and their dog that barked too much. Said they needed time to stabilize after he got laid off. I didn't ask questions. I just cleared out the guest room, cooked extra portions, and kept the fridge full. Now I was locked out. I stepped back and looked at the windows. All shut. Curtains drawn. The same living room curtains I'd bought last spring, yellow with a white trim, hanging behind the glass like nothing was wrong. I tried calling Trevor. Voicemail. Then Denise. Voicemail again. I stood on my own front porch, dressed in slacks and the pale green blouse I saved for errands, and felt suddenly like a stranger to everything around me. The hedges I trimmed myself every Sunday. The flower bed I'd planted in memory of James. The welcome mat that read, "There's always room for one more." Even that now seemed like a joke. My phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "We're in a meeting. We'll call you later." A meeting? I replied quickly. "The door code isn't working. I'm outside." No response. The street was quiet. Late afternoon lull. A few cars parked under the big elms. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower hummed. I looked at my car, the old Honda, parked right in the driveway where I'd left it before heading out this morning to the dentist. I'd expected to be back by 2. It was now 4. I rang the bell one more time. Nothing. I sat on the porch step, suitcase beside me. I'd only packed it because Denise asked me if I wouldn't mind spending a night or 2 with Aunt June. Something about needing space to prepare for her mother's visit. I'd said yes, of course. June only lives 20 minutes away. But she'd texted this morning to say her blood pressure was acting up, and the guest room was full of medical equipment now, so I came home early. But home had changed the locks on me. No, not home. Trevor. I tried calling again, left a voicemail this time. "Trevor, I don't know what's going on, but I'm locked out. The code's not working. Please call me back." I hung up and stared at the front door. James built that porch with his own hands. I still remember the spring he did it. He cursed through the whole thing, said he'd never worked with more stubborn wood, but when it was done, he made me sit beside him with 2 lemonades and watch the neighborhood go by. Said, "This is how I want to grow old." He never got the chance. Heart went out like a light at 65. And now, 13 years later, I was sitting on the same porch, not as a woman growing old in peace, but as someone denied entry to her own life. A neighbor jogged by, nodded at me. I smiled back, out of habit. Couldn't very well explain that I, Edna Lowry, homeowner of 34 years, was locked out of the very house whose mortgage I'd paid off by teaching middle school English 5 days a week and tutoring on weekends. I tried the code one last time. The keypad blinked red, then nothing. My phone battery was at 12%. It wouldn't last much longer. I thought about driving somewhere, a diner maybe, but I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the idea of sitting alone in a booth with a stale coffee and nowhere to go felt unbearable. So I stayed. I watched the sun start to dip behind the roofs. The door didn't open. Not for me. Not anymore. I slept in the car. Not really slept. More like drifted in and out, my neck twisted against the headrest, blanketless and cold even though it was mid-May. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the door blinking, access denied, flashed behind my lids. That voice, flat, robotic, final, repeating what I never thought I'd hear in my own home. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of sprinklers hissing in someone's yard. My legs were stiff, my mouth dry. I'd parked just down the street, not wanting to draw attention. It was bad enough that Trevor hadn't answered a single call all day. Worse that I still hadn't heard from Denise either. I checked my phone. 4% left. No messages. I sat there, staring at the little house barely visible under the yellow porch light. My house. James and I bought it in 1989 when Trevor was still in 3rd grade. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a sloped backyard where I planted lilacs and he set up a rickety tree swing. The house needed work back then. We saved for years just to fix the roof. James used to joke that every shingle up there was paid for in chalk dust from my classroom. I kept thinking maybe it was a mistake, a glitch, some software thing. Maybe Trevor didn't even realize what had happened. But it wasn't a glitch. It was a choice. I could feel it in the silence. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit in a car like a vagabond, waiting for someone to toss me a crumb of an explanation. I started the engine, turned around, and drove to the only person I could think of who might not pretend she didn't know me. Marcy Bryant. We weren't close. Not anymore. Used to be, back in the day. She was my next-door neighbor for 25 years before her husband died, and she moved into one of those condos across from the pharmacy. We still exchanged Christmas cards. She brought me soup when I had shingles 3 winters ago. Good woman. Liked to talk too much. Always had opinions. It was just after 6 when I knocked on her door. Marcy answered in a robe with curlers in her hair and eyebrows half drawn. She blinked at me, then frowned. Edna? I'm sorry it's early, I said, but I need a favor. My phone's dead and Oh, honey, come in, she said, pulling the door wide. You look awful. I didn't say anything, just stepped inside and stood there while she shuffled to the kitchen, muttering about water for tea and finding the phone charger. When I sat down at her dining table, it hit me all over again. How absurd this was. How shameful. Your son changed the locks? Marcy asked over her shoulder, like she was asking about the weather. My back straightened. It's a smart lock. I think the code was changed. And you didn't change it? No. She turned and looked at me. Really looked. You need to talk to someone, a lawyer maybe. I will, I said. But first I need to figure out what exactly he's done. Marcy poured the tea. Well, you always were too soft on that boy. Gave him the car when he was 20, paid for that 2nd degree he never used. I remember when Denise came along. You didn't like her, did you? I didn't answer. She didn't need my answer. My silence said enough. I told my Alan, she went on. Some women love too hard and raise boys who think the world owes them comfort. I looked at her. I was talking about myself. she added with a sad smile. While the tea steeped, I called my bank from her landline, asked for a check on all activity from the last 72 hours. The woman on the line was polite, but there was a pause when I gave my name. "Yes, Mrs. Lowry," she said. "There was a login request yesterday from a secondary account holder, Trevor Lowry. He accessed the dashboard and updated some permissions." "Updated how?" "Removed an authorized card, added a joint control tag to the household account. I see a note here regarding power of attorney." "I didn't authorize that." "It was submitted electronically. Do you want to place a hold on access until we confirm?" I said yes. When I hung up, Marcy slid a plate of toast across the table. "You going to let them get away with this?" "No." "Good," she said. "Because if you don't do something, they'll write you out of your own life. I've seen it happen. Quiet, neat little thefts of space, of dignity. I just want to go home," I said quietly. Marcy touched my hand. "Then take it back." And something in me clicked. I wasn't just some little old lady with a floral blouse and mild tremor. I was a woman who'd raised a son alone after James died, taught English to snot-nosed middle schoolers for 32 years, paid off a 30-year mortgage in 19, and kept food on the table even when James's pension dried up. I knew how to fight. I just hadn't had to for a while, until now. By 8 o'clock, I was back in my car with 2 slices of Marcy's banana bread wrapped in foil and a charged phone in my purse. I didn't call Trevor again. What was the point? There's a silence that speaks louder than shouting. I drove slowly, every bump in the road a reminder of the stiffness in my joints, the kind of morning where even turning the steering wheel felt like a chore. I didn't care. I wasn't going far. Just 2 blocks over lived Emma, my granddaughter. She was 23, a part-time barista and full-time art student, with a laugh like clinking glass and a streak of blue in her hair that never seemed to stay in the same place 2 months in a row. She was Trevor's daughter from his first marriage, before Denise. He hardly mentioned her these days, said she was too emotional. I always thought she was just brave enough to be honest. Emma answered the door in leggings and a paint-streaked hoodie, her face still soft with sleep. "Grandma?" She blinked. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Then I shook my head. She stepped aside without asking another question and let me in. Her apartment was small, the kind of small that meant the sink doubled as a dish rack and the kitchen counter was also a desk. It smelled faintly of coffee grounds and turpentine. I sat on a beanbag chair because there wasn't much else and watched her fumble for mugs and start the kettle. "What happened?" "They changed the code," I said. Emma froze, her back to me. "The house?" "Yes." She turned around slowly. "What do you mean they?" "Trevor? Or Denise? Or both?" Her lips pressed together. "Did you ask them why?" "They're not answering." Emma didn't say anything for a long moment, just poured hot water into mismatched mugs and handed me one. I wrapped my hands around it like it could keep me from unraveling. "They've been acting weird," she finally said. "Last week, Dad told me not to drop by unannounced. Said Denise needed space. Like I was some stranger." I looked at her. "I thought maybe it was just me," she said. "But now, no, not just you." We sat in silence. On the wall above her tiny couch were half-finished canvases, one with wide strokes of yellow and gray, another with what looked like a doorway surrounded by eyes. "They used my own money," I said quietly, "to pay for that lock." Emma looked over. "I checked the bank this morning. He accessed my account, changed permissions." "That's illegal." "Not if he used the power of attorney form I signed last year." Her face twisted. "The one you signed after the flu? When you were sick and they said it was just to help with errands? I nodded. You can revoke it. I will. We sat like that for a while. The tea went lukewarm. I didn't drink it. My body ached. But underneath all of that, the fatigue, the shame, there was something else growing. Something sharper. Not quite anger yet, but close. They think you'll do nothing, Emma said suddenly. They think you'll just sit there and take it because you always do. I looked at her, startled. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean that in a bad way. Just, you've always been the peacekeeper, the fixer. I smiled, faintly. You're not wrong. But maybe it's time you stop. I didn't say anything, but I heard her. Every word. After I'd washed my face and borrowed a comb, I called my lawyer. Edith Garvey had been handling my affairs since James passed. She was calm, methodical, and, most importantly, not prone to overreaction. When I explained what happened, she didn't gasp or offer pity. She just said, "Come in, today." So I did. The office was a little building next to the pharmacy, the sign slightly askew. Edith wore her usual navy blazer and had reading glasses perched on her head like a forgotten crown. We went over everything: the power of attorney, the house deed, the bank access. "Did you sign anything else recently?" she asked. "No." "Then it's simple. We revoke the POA, notify the financial institutions, and, if you'd like, begin the process of restoring sole ownership of your property." I looked at her. "It's still mine." "For now," she said gently. "But if they change the locks and won't let you in, that's a possession issue. You're still the legal owner, but they're occupying it." "Squatting, you mean?" "In nicer clothes, yes." I signed the revocation. It felt like nothing, a few pen strokes. But as I handed the paper back, something inside me steadied. "You're going to be all right," Edith said. "I know." When I stepped outside, the sky was gray. Light rain had started to fall. I pulled my cardigan tighter and walked to my car, the whole way thinking about what Marcy said at breakfast. Quiet, neat little thefts. They'd taken my key, my space, my peace. But not for much longer. The bank branch on Lafayette opened at 9. I was already waiting on the bench outside by 8:45, my purse on my lap and the printed revocation papers in a manila folder at my side. The rain had passed by then, leaving the sidewalk wet and glinting, and the early sun cut sharp shadows through the trees. I hadn't told Trevor I was coming. Didn't see the point. I wasn't giving him another warning. At 9 sharp, the doors clicked open, and a young man in a tidy vest held them for me with a smile. "Good morning, ma'am." "Morning," I said, and stepped inside. The bank manager, a woman named Clarice, had met me once before, years ago, when James and I refinanced the house. She was in her 50s now, with silver-streaked hair and a polite but practiced voice. When I introduced myself, she glanced down at her monitor, then gave me a sharp little nod. "I see we've had some recent changes to your account. Would you like to review them?" I handed her the folder. "I'm revoking power of attorney, effective immediately. I'd like all access frozen except my own." She flipped through the papers, her brow twitching slightly. "I'll need to verify with legal," she said. "But yes, this is in order. Have you experienced unauthorized activity?" "I'd call it presumptuous," I said. "But yes." Clarice made a note. "We'll update your access controls today. Any automatic transfers or linked user activity will be paused until you confirm them personally." I nodded. "Also, I want to remove Trevor Lowry from any shared account permissions, immediately." Another note. Clarice hesitated. "Do you want to keep your joint account active, Or, there is no joint account. He opened that one with my name, not my consent. Now she looked properly startled. I'd like a full report of all activity on that account, starting 3 months ago. Yes, of course. She stood, professional smile back in place. If you don't mind waiting, I'll have someone bring it up for you. Take your time, I said, and sat down. While I waited, I pulled my phone from my purse. Still no response from Trevor. No apology, no explanation. The longer the silence stretched, the clearer it all became. It wasn't a mistake, it was strategy. It was a neat little plan between him and Denise. Keep me just comfortable enough to stay quiet, but slowly nudge me out. Little things at first. The rearranged medicine cabinet, the grocery receipts I never saw, the increasing number of closed-door conversations in my own kitchen. They treated me like a ghost long before they locked the door. A young woman brought over a folder and set it on the table. I opened it. The first page showed a wire transfer to a luxury home security service, $3,200. Then, a digital subscription to a Wine of the Month club, $129. Denise's name listed on the shipping. Then, recurring charges from a private wellness clinic. Then Trevor's gym membership. Then an invoice for a dog training program. For a dog they never asked me if they could bring. Page after page. They hadn't just locked me out of the house. They'd used my name, my money, to finance their new version of it. And I'd let them. Because I trusted them. Because I thought love worked on the honor system. Clarice returned with a stack of forms and a quiet expression. I'm very sorry this happened, she said. We'll make sure your accounts are protected from now on. Thank you, I said. As I signed the last form, her eyes paused on me. If you don't mind me saying, not many women your age handle this so quickly. Most wait. Hope it'll fix itself. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm done hoping. The drive back to Emma's was quiet. My hands on the wheel were steady. When I pulled up outside her apartment, I saw her through the window. Sitting on the floor, surrounded by sketch pads. She looked up and saw me, waved. I held up the folder like a trophy, and she grinned. Inside, I set the documents on her little kitchen table and sank into a chair. Done? Done. Emma poured 2 glasses of orange juice and pushed one toward me. They'll be furious. They already are, I said. They just haven't shown it yet. She sipped. You think they'll come here? I shook my head. No. That would require facing me. What now? Now, I said. We get the house back. I didn't need to think long about which lawyer to call. Howard Bell was old, like me. Maybe a few years younger, maybe not. We'd first met 30 years ago when James and I wrote our wills together, and Howard had the same soft, deliberate way of speaking then as he did now. He wore bow ties that never matched his suits and had a memory sharper than any computer. His assistant scheduled me for the next morning. His office hadn't changed in decades. Dark wood paneling, heavy drapes, a grandfather clock that ticked like it was reminding you of something important. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. Edna, he said when I walked in, his handshake warm and dry. It's been too long. Long enough, I replied. He didn't ask small questions. He simply gestured toward the chair opposite his desk and waited while I explained everything. The lock, the access denied message, the bank accounts, the silence. When I finished, Howard leaned back, fingertips pressed together, and let out a breath through his nose. Let me guess, he said. They convinced you to sign a revocable gift deed just to make things easier? I nodded. Do you have a copy? I pulled it from my folder. He scanned the pages with practiced speed. Yes, here it is. Full transfer of title, no life estate clause, no conditions. Classic move, and the signatures witnessed. He looked up. They own the house now, legally. I didn't flinch. I want it back. Howard nodded, slowly. There are 2 ways, he said. 1. We file for revocation based on undue influence, prove they manipulated you or that you didn't understand the consequences. That can work, but it's slow and it's not guaranteed. And the second? We sue for constructive trust. You argue the property was transferred under conditions that were later violated, namely, the expectation that you'd continue to live there. I sipped the tea his assistant had brought in earlier. It had gone cold, but I didn't care. I'm not leaving this to chance, Howard. Then we do both. He started drafting the notice right then and there. I watched him work, the sound of his pen scratching on legal pad oddly comforting. Outside the window, the day had gone gray again, summer trying to arrive but not quite ready. Do they know you've been to the bank? He asked. I haven't told them anything. Good. Let them sweat. I'm not doing this to punish them, I said quietly. Howard looked up. I'm doing it so I can sleep in my own bed again, so I don't have to explain to my granddaughter why the woman who raised her father is sitting on a borrowed futon with a plastic bag of clothes. He didn't reply. He just nodded once and kept writing. When we were finished, he slid the manila envelope toward me. This is the first volley. Serve it gently if you want, or make it hurt. I'll think about it. No rush, he said. You've already done the hard part. Stopped pretending. I stood, gathering my things. As I reached the door, he called after me. Edna. Yes? You're not the only one who's been through this. I turned. But not many fight back. On the way home, Emma's home, I stopped at the grocery store. Bought flour, apples, butter. Her kitchen was tiny, but I needed to move, to use my hands. Something about making pie always steadied me. When I'd finished slicing the apples, she came out of her room, saw the counter. Grandma, she said, surprised. What are you doing? Something normal, I said. Something mine. She nodded and grabbed plates. We ate together on the floor, cross-legged, laughing over too hot filling and burnt crust edges. Later that night, I wrote the letter myself, the one I'd give Trevor with the legal notice. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I wrote plainly. You've changed the terms without a word. You've treated my silence like consent. I'm correcting that now. This house was never yours to remake. It's mine. And I'm coming home. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on Emma's pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow and unsteady, making a soft clicking sound like something always on the verge of breaking. The pillow smelled faintly of her shampoo, lavender, and something sweet I couldn't place, and the blanket she gave me was warm enough, but none of it felt right. Because it wasn't my bed. I'd slept in the same room for 34 years. James on the left side until he passed, me on the right, with the second drawer of the nightstand full of chapstick, loose change, and old cards. I used to wake up at night just to watch him breathe. Now I woke up, trying to remember where my slippers were. At 7, I was already dressed. Emma stirred when she heard the kettle whistle and came out rubbing her eyes. Early day? I'm going back, I said. She blinked. To the house? Yes. Alone? I'm not breaking in. I'm knocking. Emma stood a moment, processing. Then she nodded. Do you want me to come? No. She poured herself coffee, silently. When I left, I tucked the envelope, the legal letter and my note, into my purse, right next to the receipt for the security system Trevor had paid for with my card. I wanted it with me, in case I forgot for even a second why I was doing this. The drive felt shorter this time, maybe because I wasn't afraid. My hands were steady on the wheel. The neighborhood looked the same. Trimmed lawns, cars already gone from driveways, sprinklers ticking on automatic timers. But to me, everything felt slightly off, like someone had tilted the picture frame just enough that you couldn't ignore it. I parked across the street, sat a moment, watched the windows. Curtains were open now. Someone was up. I walked up the path, pressed the bell. No answer. I waited 30 seconds. Pressed again. The door opened suddenly, and there stood Denise, hair in rollers, face bare, robe belted tight. Her mouth twisted the second she saw me. "Oh, Edna. Good morning." She didn't move to let me in. "I came for a conversation." Her eyes narrowed. "Now's not a good time. Neither was Tuesday or Wednesday. You're being dramatic." I opened my purse slowly, pulled out the envelope. "This is a legal notice from my attorney. It outlines the process of revoking the deed and restoring title based on misuse and violation of verbal agreement. There's also a copy of the bank report showing unauthorized expenditures from my account." She took it with stiff fingers. "I'd recommend Trevor reads it carefully." Her voice was thin. "You gave us that house?" "No," I said. "I gave access. You took ownership." She laughed, short and brittle. "What are you even trying to prove? You want the house back?" "Fine. Take it. But you'll be alone. Again." I looked at her calmly. "I've been alone since you moved in. I just didn't admit it." Then I turned and walked down the steps, each one steadier than the last. She didn't call after me, didn't slam the door either. When I got back to the car, I sat for a moment, watching the porch. No movement, no sign of Trevor. I texted Emma. Delivered. Not sure if it stung, but it landed. She wrote back a minute later, "You stung. Trust me." That afternoon, I got a call from Howard. "They've received the letter." "Any reaction?" "A voicemail from Trevor. He's emotional." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I knew exactly what the tone was. I'd heard it before. That mix of indignation and disbelief. The wounded ego of a man who thought his mother would never draw a line. But I had. And I wasn't stepping back. The letter didn't just land. It shook something loose. By the next morning, I'd received my first direct message from Trevor in 5 days. Not a phone call, not even a voice message. A text. "This is getting out of hand. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. It wasn't anger that kept me silent. Not anymore. It was clarity. After a lifetime of being the one to reach first, smooth things over, soften the tone, I'd finally understood. Silence isn't absence. It's protection. I spent the morning with Emma. She'd invited me to sit in on one of her classes, a portfolio review she called it. And while I was hesitant at first, me at a university art class, I agreed. Mostly because I needed to be around someone who looked at me like I wasn't a problem to be solved. Her classroom smelled like acrylic and ambition. Young people in baggy sweaters and wide eyes held up canvases and spoke about color theory and emotional layering. One boy presented a series of portraits drawn in charcoal, all older women. One had rollers in her hair and stared dead into the viewer's soul. "This one reminds me of my grandmother," he said. "She doesn't say much, but she always sees." I blinked hard. Afterward, Emma introduced me to her professor, a man in his 60s with more paint on his hands than a hardware store. "She's the Edna?" he said, smiling wide. Your muse? Emma rolled her eyes, laughing. She makes the best apple pie in the county. We walked home slowly, the afternoon sun making long shadows on the sidewalk. At the corner, we stopped for a cold drink. Sat on a bench. You okay? She asked. I think so. You've been different this week. How so? She shrugged. Still you? Just less apologetic? I took a sip from my paper cup. I used to think being quiet was strength, but maybe it's just what people hoped I'd be. Emma didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We passed a real estate office on the walk back, photos of perfect homes in glossy frames. One of them looked eerily like mine, except brighter, shinier, and scrubbed of any history. It made me think. I didn't want to just get back in. I wanted it on record, legally, publicly, that I had been removed without right, that my silence wasn't consent. That afternoon, I emailed Howard and asked him to file the civil claim. I knew it would go to mediation first. Courtrooms were slow things. But I wanted the timeline started. Let them explain to a neutral party how the woman who paid every property tax for 3 decades now needed permission to sleep in her own bed. Later, while folding laundry, I heard a knock at the door. Emma was out. I opened it. And there stood a man I hadn't seen in 20 years. He was taller now, broader, with a few gray hairs along his temples, but I knew those eyes immediately. Mrs. Lowry? He asked. Call me Edna, I said. You're Caleb Brooks. I was in your 8th grade English class. You once made me rewrite a book report 5 times until it wasn't garbage. I laughed, caught off guard. You still holding a grudge? On the contrary. I work for the county planning office now. I write reports for a living. I stepped aside. Come in. Let me make you some tea. We sat in the small kitchen, knees nearly touching, the kettle whistling like it was glad for company. He told me he'd heard about my situation through the grapevine. Apparently, Denise's sister had posted something vague online about entitled elders making life harder for their loving families. That's one way to put it, I muttered. I figured it might be you, Caleb said. I've kept tabs over the years. You taught me more than how to write. You taught me how not to lie to myself. I blinked again. Twice in 1 week. Anyway, he said, reaching into his bag, I run a little property solutions firm on the side. We help seniors file housing disputes, review land records, that sort of thing. If you ever need documents traced or assessed, let me help. No charge. I stared at him. You're a godsend. No, ma'am, he said with a smile. Just a kid who got tired of people underestimating the quiet ones. That evening, as I filed the last set of papers Howard sent me and rechecked the bank statements Clarice had printed, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Momentum. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was taking back ground. I returned to the house on Friday. Not to talk, not to negotiate, just to reclaim my things. I'd called ahead, left a voicemail, short and formal. I'll be by at 2 p.m. to retrieve my belongings. Please ensure access is available. This is not a discussion. No reply, of course. But I wasn't asking. Emma insisted on coming with me. Just in case, she said, and I didn't argue. She drove. I didn't want to waste the steadiness in my hands on the steering wheel. I wanted it saved for the front steps. When we pulled up, the front door was already ajar. That was new. Denise met us on the porch. Lipstick on, sunglasses in her hair, arms crossed tight across her chest, like she was bracing for wind. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Trevor, standing in the hall, motionless. You could have sent a mover, Denise said. I'm not a guest, I replied. I don't need an appointment. Emma stayed close but silent. I'd told her to let me speak unless things turned ugly. So far, they were just brittle. Denise didn't move. I'd like to get my clothes, jewelry box, the keepsake chest in the attic, and my journals, I said. Denise's jaw shifted. We boxed most of it already. That word, we, made something flicker behind my ribs. I stepped past her. Inside, the house smelled different, like plug-in perfume and dog hair. My curtains were gone, replaced with something gauzy and beige. The living room furniture had been rearranged, and the armchair James used to sit in had vanished. In its place, a sleek recliner in fake leather, brown and oversized. It looked like it had never belonged to anyone. I moved through the house like a guest. The walls didn't seem to remember me anymore. Trevor still hadn't spoken. "Your things are in the garage," he muttered finally, not meeting my eyes. "In boxes?" "Yes." "All of it?" He nodded. Emma shot him a look sharp enough to slice tile. I walked into the garage and stopped. There were 5 boxes, labeled in black marker, mom clothes, mom misc, kitchen, old, trinkets, and, the last one, junk. That word burned more than the silence. "Where's the cedar chest?" I asked. Trevor glanced at Denise. She shrugged. "In the attic, probably. We didn't touch it." "I'll get it." "No, I'll do it," he said too quickly. I raised an eyebrow. "Let him," Emma murmured. "We don't need to watch him fumble." He disappeared up the stairs. Emma opened the box labeled junk. Inside, 3 framed photos, a chipped mug I'd painted in a craft class, and a knitted scarf I'd made for Denise 5 Christmases ago. "I guess this says everything," she whispered. I didn't reply. Trevor came back down, breathing hard. The cedar chest looked the same as ever. Scratched, heavy, but intact. I touched the lid gently. Inside were my letters from James, Emma's kindergarten drawings, and every birthday card Trevor had ever made me from ages 5 through 12. "Help me carry it," I told him. He flinched, then obeyed. We moved in silence. Set it gently in the trunk of Emma's car. When he stepped back, I turned to face him. "You had a chance to treat this house like home," I said. "Not property, not leverage, but a home." He didn't speak. "You chose otherwise." His voice was low. "You locked me out of the accounts. I locked out misuse, not you." He looked at me then, really looked. For the first time in what felt like years, not with anger, with something close to shame. "I didn't think you'd fight back." "I raised you," I said. "That was your first mistake." Denise had come to the door again. She said nothing, but her arms were crossed tighter now, her mouth pinched. I climbed into the car. Emma started the engine. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years waiting for someone to open the door for me. From now on, I'd build doors of my own. Monday morning, I rewrote my will. Howard spread the papers out across his desk like a map, and together we traced every road I no longer intended to walk. I brought coffee in a thermos and the cedar chest with me, not for legal reasons, but because I needed it near. A reminder that memory is a form of ownership, too. "Are you certain about this?" he asked, pen poised. "There's no going back." "I was certain the day the door didn't open," I said. He nodded. The new will named one beneficiary, Emma. The language was precise. She would inherit the house, but not yet. The estate would transfer into a lifetime trust. Until then, she could live there, use it, care for it. But it couldn't be sold, borrowed against, or claimed by anyone else. Not even her. A protective measure, a declaration of trust and boundaries. "You're also assigning her as durable power of attorney?" Howard asked. "Yes." He didn't raise an eyebrow. She's young, trustworthy. Unlike some, I said. He smiled faintly and continued writing. We included a clause denying access or claims to Trevor and Denise, effective immediately. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. Legal, permanent, documented distance. An hour later, I signed the last page with a firm hand. That's it, Howard said, stacking the documents. It's all in place. No more quiet thefts, I said. No more, he agreed. I left his office lighter than I'd entered. Not joyful, but composed. Like I'd cleaned out a closet that had been stuffed too full for too long. On the way back to Emma's, I stopped at the post office. Sent a certified letter to Trevor. Not angry, not cruel. Just a copy of the revised will, with the note, "For your records, no response necessary." I didn't expect to hear back, and I didn't. That evening, Emma and I sat at her tiny table and shared takeout noodles. She read the legal print while I sipped tea. "You trust me with all this?" she asked, voice low. "I trust you not to need it." She looked up. "You mean not to expect anything?" "No," I said. "Not to need ownership to feel connection. That's where your father went wrong." She nodded slowly, eyes wide. We didn't speak for a while after that. I watched the steam rise from her cup and thought about how inheritance isn't just money or property. It's how we pass on our silence, our habits, our dignity, or the lack of it. I wanted Emma to inherit truth. After she went to bed, I sat alone by the window and wrote a letter. To myself, a habit I hadn't returned to in years. Dear Edna, you've spent your life making space for others. You paid for rooms you were later locked out of. You cooked for mouths that forgot to say thank you. You softened every edge so others wouldn't feel scratched. But now you're learning that dignity isn't a prize given by others. It's a door you lock from the inside. And this time, only you have the key. I folded the letter and placed it in the cedar chest. Then I turned off the light and slept. Really slept. The next morning, I froze the accounts. Every single one. Even the grocery card Trevor used for his weekly shopping, especially that one. I'd warned them in quiet ways. Given chances. Grace. But grace only works if it's received with humility. Otherwise, it becomes a leash. Clarice at the bank handled it quickly. I didn't need to explain much anymore. She'd seen enough. By noon, I had new account numbers, fresh logins, and a sealed record of every transaction from the last 90 days. Trevor called at 2:17 p.m. I let it ring. Then again at 2:29. The third time, I picked up. His voice came in fast, a mix of disbelief and anger, like he couldn't believe I was actually treating him like someone who'd done something wrong. "Mom, what is this? I just tried to get gas and the card was declined." "Sounds like a budgeting problem," I said. He didn't laugh. "You're freezing your own son out of money after everything we've done for you?" "Everything? We've taken care of the house, managed bills, made sure you had food. You locked me out." A pause. His breath, sharp in the receiver. "That was temporary. You blew it out of proportion. You used my money to upgrade the locks, pay for dog training, and order wine subscriptions you never asked permission for. That's not stealing." "No," I said. "It's entitlement." Another silence. "You're going to regret this," he said finally. "No, Trevor, you are." I hung up before he could say more. It didn't feel triumphant. Just clean. Emma came home late that evening. She'd been helping a friend move. Her hands were smudged, her shoulders tired. "I saw him," she said, not sitting yet. "Who?" "Your son. He was parked outside the campus, just sitting there. When he saw me, he pulled up alongside and asked if you were okay. I looked at her. And? I told him you were better than you'd been in years. She dropped onto the couch. He looked like he'd swallowed a nail. That night, I opened the cedar chest again, took out the scarf, the one I'd knit for Denise, held it for a while, unsure what it meant anymore. Sometimes the things we give with love return with silence. Sometimes silence is the only answer left. I folded it again, carefully, and placed it in a smaller box. The next day, I dropped it off at the community shelter, along with 2 coats, a bag of kitchen tools, and a stack of hardcover books I no longer needed. Things should be useful, I thought, not just remembered. By the end of the week, I'd transferred every utility out of their names: water, electric, garbage, all restored under my control. It was mine again, not just legally, in tone, in breath. The house would come back to me in time, but dignity returned first. Emma and I sat at the kitchen table, her fingers curled around a chipped mug, mine resting on the cedar chest between us. The late sun filtered through the blinds in slats of dusty gold. I hadn't asked her to come home early. She just showed up, 2 paper bags of groceries in hand, and a look in her eyes like she already knew what I needed. "Tell me everything," she said. I didn't dramatize. I didn't soften. I told her how it started. The shift, the small dismissals, the code change. I told her about the bank accounts, the new locks, the junk box in the garage labeled like I was already gone. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she set her mug down carefully. "I knew it was bad," she said, "but I didn't realize how quiet it had gotten. For you." I nodded. That's the worst part. Not the betrayal. The silence afterward. The way I kept waiting for someone to notice. She swallowed, hard. "I'm sorry, Grandma. You didn't do it. I didn't stop it either. You're stopping it now." We sat for a moment longer. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't expected. Not pity, not anger. Admiration. "I need to tell you something," she said. "All right. I saw Dad last week, at the coffee shop near campus. He didn't see me. He was talking to someone, a man I didn't recognize. He said, 'We need to get ahead of the story. She's making us look bad.'" I closed my eyes. Not from shock, from weariness. "What did you do?" I asked. "Walked past, loudly, so he'd know I heard." I smiled then. "That's your mother in you." She tilted her head. "You didn't like her." I didn't like how she left, but I respected her honesty. She never pretended. Emma was quiet. "I'm glad you didn't inherit the pretending," I said. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the cedar chest. "What happens now?" "Mediation," I said. "Then most likely court. They'll try to stall. Maybe smear me a little, but I'm ready. You shouldn't have to fight like this. I shouldn't have to sleep in someone else's house either. But here we are." We sat in companionable silence, both of us tracing the edges of the wood grain with our fingertips. Then I looked at her. "There's something I want to ask." "Anything." "When I move back in, if I do, would you stay with me? Not out of pity. Not forever. Just for a while." Her eyes filled. "Of course I will. You have your own life. I don't want to steal that." "You're not stealing anything," she said. "You're giving me a place to belong." I nodded, quietly. Later, as she cleaned up the dishes, I pulled a notebook from the chest. Started a list. Not of grievances, not anymore. Of repairs. Things to fix. The garden beds. The broken porch light. The hall closet with the warped hinge. I was coming home, and I wanted the house to be ready for something new. Not just restored, but revived. Not just mine, ours. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I wore a navy sweater and slacks. Simple, clean. Emma offered to come, but I told her no. This part I needed to do alone. Not because I wanted to protect her. She didn't need that. But because there are battles a woman has to walk into with no one behind her. So if she wins, it's hers. Entirely. The conference room was beige in every possible way. Walls, carpet, the faces of the men who greeted me with two smooth smiles. Trevor was already seated. Denise beside him, flipping through her phone like the whole thing was beneath her. Trevor didn't look up at first. When he finally did, his expression was blank, a kind of forced civility that only deepened the space between us. I sat across from them, calm, the mediator, a man named Grant with square glasses and the voice of someone used to ending arguments by offering compromises no one liked, began with a summary. Property transfer. Alleged misconduct. The disputed intention behind the deed. Ms. Lowry contends that she was misled, he said, that the home was signed over under false pretenses with a verbal understanding she would retain full access and residence. Trevor finally spoke. That was never in writing. No, I said, just in 34 years of bills, maintenance, and memories. He had the decency to look embarrassed for about a second. Grant continued. Mr. Lowry asserts that the property was gifted without condition and that recent actions by Ms. Lowry, namely the freezing of joint accounts, demonstrate instability and an inability to manage shared residence. Denise smirked at that part. I didn't blink. I froze the accounts, I said evenly, after they were used without my consent. I didn't make a scene. I didn't change the locks. I just stopped funding my own erasure. Trevor shifted. Denise finally looked up. You were acting irrationally, showing up unannounced, refusing to leave when asked. I was locked out of my house without warning, I said. It wasn't your house anymore, she said, cool as a countertop. Grant raised a hand. Let's focus on options. We discussed settlement offers. They wanted me to take a buyout, a lump sum, far less than the property's worth, and a formal statement relinquishing all claims. They even offered to assist with relocation, as if I were some tenant overstaying a lease. I refused, politely, but firmly. I'm not moving, I said. I'm reclaiming. Trevor looked at me then, not with anger, not entirely. There was something else there, a flicker of the boy who used to bring me dandelions in fists too small to hold them all. I didn't think it would come to this, he said quietly. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't think. In the end, no agreement was reached. Grant sighed, collected his folders, and scheduled a court date. Outside the building, Trevor caught up with me. Are you really going to take this all the way? He asked. I turned to face him. I already have. He didn't follow me to the car. That night, Emma and I sat on the floor with pizza and root beer, watching a rerun of some courtroom drama. She asked how it went. I gave her the short version. They don't think I'll go through with it, I said. They still believe I'm bluffing. Emma smirked. Then let them keep believing. I looked at her. This girl who had become my mirror in ways I hadn't seen coming. Sharp, loyal, unafraid of the truth. I thought of the house again, not just the rooms and windows, but what it had always meant. A place where someone like her could grow strong without apology. I'll win, I said softly. Emma didn't answer. She just reached for my hand. I walked through the house alone before the hearing. Howard had advised against it, said it might muddy the optics. But I didn't care. I wasn't sneaking. I wasn't stealing anything. I was remembering. The side door was still unlocked. Denise had left it that way when they started moving boxes to wherever they were going. Their lawyer must have told them the optics were bad too, holding on to a house while its real owner marched into court with folders and facts. I stepped into the kitchen first. The light over the sink still flickered. No one had fixed it. The same crack in the linoleum ran like a faded scar under the fridge. Denise had changed the curtains, but she hadn't touched the tiles I laid with James the summer Trevor turned 15. I moved through each room, not to linger, to witness. They'd painted over the hallway in a color they must have thought looked modern, pale gray. Cold, but I could still see, in my mind, the pencil marks along the trim where Trevor grew taller each year, until he stopped letting me measure. The bedroom was almost empty. Only the mattress remained. My side still faced the window. I walked to the closet, opened it, half expecting the faint smell of cedar and old perfume. But it was gone now. The shelves bare. The small shoebox with James's letters wasn't there. I'd taken it weeks ago, but the shape of it was still outlined in dust. I closed the door gently. In the living room, the old bookshelf was gone. But a small chip in the wall remained, just above the spot where James had dropped the hammer putting it up. We never patched it. It became a joke. The wound in the wall, we called it. And now it was just still there. A wound with no audience. I left quietly, locked the door behind me. That was the last time I'd enter it as a visitor. The court date came. Emma sat behind me, Howard beside me, Trevor and Denise on the other side, stiff and dressed like people pretending not to be afraid. The judge was a woman, mid-50s, efficient, not unkind. She listened. She asked the right questions. Howard presented our case like a man who didn't waste words. Financial records, the revocation of the deed, the pattern of removal, the unauthorized spending. We didn't need drama. We had facts. Trevor's lawyer tried to spin it. She willingly signed the deed. Yes, Howard agreed. Under the verbal agreement, she would remain a resident and co-decision maker. That agreement was violated. Denise didn't speak. Her silence that day said more than any testimony could. When it was my turn to speak, the courtroom felt too quiet. I stood. No paper, no notes. Just the truth. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came because one day I realized my name was being erased from the house I paid for, the life I built, and the family I held together for too long on my own. I came because I gave and kept giving until the locks changed without a word. The judge watched me carefully. I didn't make noise, I continued. Not right away. I didn't cause scenes. I made pies, paid bills, offered rides, bought birthday gifts. I was quiet, and I was pushed aside quietly too. Howard didn't interrupt. He knew better. But silence isn't agreement, and kindness isn't consent. I came to reclaim what I didn't give away. My place, my name, my dignity. I sat down. Emma squeezed my hand, and we waited. The ruling came a week later. Howard called first. His voice was calm, but I could hear it. The satisfaction beneath the formality, the quiet triumph of a man who's spent his life doing things the right way, even when no one's clapping. You won, he said. I didn't say anything for a moment, not because I was shocked, because I was relieved in a way that didn't come with a cheer, just breath, just stillness. They've vacated the property, Howard added, voluntarily. Denise signed the papers herself. No appeals filed. You'll be re-entering with full title reinstated, retroactive to the original date of transfer. And the accounts. Frozen activity confirmed as unauthorized. Funds are being returned. Not all of them, but most. Thank you, I said. No, he replied. Thank you for making this easier than it should have been. I hung up. Sat a long time. Let the weight of it settle. Not victory. Reclamation. Emma came home later that day with a grocery bag under one arm and a bouquet of grocery store tulips under the other. Did he call? Yes. She looked at me, reading everything I wasn't saying. And? We won. Her smile came slowly, as if she didn't want to break the stillness either. She set the bag down, placed the tulips in a jar with water, and stood beside me. What now? Now, I said, we go home. We waited 2 more days. Enough time to ensure the utilities had transferred, the property cleared, the keys replaced. I wasn't in a rush. The hardest part was over. What came next was work, but the kind you choose. When we pulled up the driveway, it was mid-morning. July sun, warm, not yet unbearable. A single black garbage bag sat at the curb. Denise's doing, most likely. A last mark, like a period on a sentence she thought she was writing. I didn't care. The door opened with a soft click. No passcode, no digital denial, just a key in a lock that belonged to me again. Emma stepped in first. The air inside was still slightly musty, empty in a new way. Smells like unbothered dust, she joked. We moved from room to room. Most of the furniture was gone. They'd taken what they'd brought. That was fine. I never cared for the recliner. My bookshelf could be rebuilt. The house wasn't in what they left behind. It was in what I remembered. We spent the day airing out rooms, cleaning corners, scrubbing down cabinets that hadn't been touched in months. I found a few things left behind. A dog toy, a cracked charger, a pair of Denise's slippers in the hall closet. Emma gathered them in a box. What do you want to do with this? Let the trash have it, I said. By late afternoon, the house had light in it again. Real light. Not the filtered kind through gauze curtains, but the open sort that lands on wood floors and makes everything smell like old summers. I sat in the kitchen while Emma mopped. The linoleum still had that crack near the fridge. I stared at it for a while, then laughed. I'm keeping it, I said aloud. Emma looked up, puzzled. The crack? Yes, she grinned. Symbol of survival? No, reminder that I lived here before them, and after. That night, we ate dinner on the floor. Takeout again. Our chairs hadn't arrived. Emma's cat had already claimed the hallway, sprawled like a tiny queen. Before bed, I opened the cedar chest, pulled out the scarf, Denise's, and walked it to the garbage. It didn't burn. It didn't sting. It just left. Then I took out the letter I'd written to myself weeks ago. Read it once. Folded it again. But this time, I didn't put it back. I slid it into the empty slot of the bookshelf I would rebuild. Because sometimes dignity isn't just kept, it's displayed. They thought I would vanish quietly. I know that now. Not out of bitterness, but from watching how people behave when consequences finally arrive. They blink a lot. Shift blame. Rewrite what happened. Not with lies exactly, but with softened versions of events where they're always well-meaning. Trevor sent a message last week. Just a few lines. I've been thinking about everything. About you, about what happened. I wish we could talk. Really talk. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some things don't need answers. I didn't want a conversation. I wanted air that didn't bend around someone else's comfort. It's been 3 weeks since I returned. The garden's coming back. Slowly. I pulled weeds with my bare hands, knelt on a cushion Emma bought from the dollar store, and dug out the roots one by one. I replanted rosemary and 2 tomato vines, bought marigolds on sale. The earth was dry in places, but I know how to coax life from hard soil. I always have. Inside, the cedar chest sits open now. Not like a wound, like a shelf. I moved the notebooks into it. The ones I started years ago, where I wrote not just memories, but things I never said aloud. Whole pages on silence, on guilt, on what it's like to be helpful until you disappear. Emma asked me if I'd ever publish them. I said no. But maybe one day she will. She sleeps in the guest room now, the one I cleared out when Trevor moved in, thinking I was making space for family. I look at that room now and realize family isn't who moves into your house. It's who guards your name when you're not in the room. She calls me roommate sometimes, joking, half affectionate. It makes me smile more than it should. The mailbox still gets things addressed to Trevor, credit card offers, alumni newsletters. I mark them return to sender and place them back inside without flinching. He hasn't shown up. I think he knows better. The neighbors are beginning to notice. One of them, Linda, across the street, brought muffins the other morning. Said, "Glad to see your curtains again." It was a kind thing to say. Simple. True. I've started something new, not big, just mine. A weekly letter I write, fold and leave on the kitchen table. Emma reads it over tea before her shift. I write about what I remember, what I learned, what I won't forget. The first one said, "Be careful who you give your silence to." Some people think it's a gift. Others treat it like permission. But silence isn't peace. And quiet doesn't mean small. You're allowed to take up space. I think maybe that's the point of it all. Not to fight for a house, but to remember that walls don't make you safe. Respect does. And you can't live where you aren't seen. So if you're reading this, if you've ever felt the slow fade of being overlooked, overstepped, overwritten, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. You don't owe anyone your vanishing. Stand. Speak. Come home to yourself. If this story meant something to you, share it. Let someone else remember they're not alone.